Cami thought she was untouchable. She thought Tommy had her back. But tonight, everything changes. The cartel is coming for her, and this time, Tommy won't be there to save her. Every shadow hides danger. Every sound could be her last. Cami sat in her small apartment, the dim glow of her laptop casting shadows across the room. Her phone buzzed again, and the screen lit up with another unknown number. She hesitated, heart racing. Then opened the message. A simple line stared back at her. "We know where you are. You can't hide." Her hands trembled as she put the phone down, the chill of fear creeping up her spine. She tried to convince herself it was a prank, maybe just someone trying to scare her. But the unease in the pit of her stomach told her this was real. Outside, the city was alive with the hum of traffic and distant sirens. But inside, her world felt like it had shrunk to just her and the danger closing in. She paced the room, her mind racing with possibilities. How did they find her? She had been careful, hiding her movements, changing her routes, never staying in one place too long, yet somehow, the cartel had tracked her down. She glanced at the windows, feeling the tension twist tighter with every passing second. Every shadow that moved on the wall, every flicker of light from the street below made her jump. The apartment, once her sanctuary, now felt like a cage. She knew she couldn't call Tommy. He wasn't answering, and that alone terrified her. More than the threats ever could, Cami's fingers brushed over a drawer filled with old memories, photos, and papers that told the story of a life she wasn't sure she'd live to finish. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She needed a plan, but panic was clawing at her, making it hard to think. The messages kept coming, each one more menacing than the last. Some had photos, shadows of people standing outside her building, just out of focus, just enough to make her heart stop. She realized then that she was being watched constantly. Every step she took, every move she made was no longer her own. The cartel didn't give warnings for long. They didn't wait. They came, and when they came, they took everything. Her thoughts drifted to Tommy again, the one person she had hoped would protect her. She remembered the last time he promised he would be there. How safe she had felt with him, but now his absence screamed louder than any threat. She had no one. She was alone. The idea of facing the cartel alone made her stomach churn. Yet she also felt a spark of determination ignite. If Tommy wouldn't come, then she had no choice but to rely on herself. She had survived threats before, but never like this. This was different. This was the cartel. They didn't make mistakes, and they didn't forgive. She knew she had to move quickly. Cami started packing, grabbing the essentials, her phone, a small bag with money, identification, and a flashlight. She didn't know where she would go, but staying put was no longer an option. Every second felt heavy, every sound outside the apartment a warning. She could hear the distant hum of engines, the occasional shout, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew they were out there, searching. The city that had once felt like home was now a maze of danger. Every alley, every streetlight, every dark corner could hide them. She forced herself to focus, to think clearly. Panic would get her killed. She needed a plan, even a small one. As she slipped on her jacket and moved toward the door, she took one last glance around the apartment, the photos on the wall. The small mementos of a life that now felt fragile seemed to stare back at her. She felt the weight of the situation pressing down, but also a strange clarity. She had to be smart. She had to be quick. The cartel was coming, and there was no turning back. Every step she took from now on could mean the difference between life and death. The shadows outside grew longer. The night deepened, and Cami stepped into the unknown, knowing this was just the beginning of a nightmare that she had no choice but to face alone. Cami moved through the streets, her footsteps silent against the wet asphalt. The rain had started, slicking the roads and reflecting the glow of streetlights like broken mirrors. Every shadow seemed alive, twisting and stretching as if reaching for her. She kept her head low, her eyes scanning every alley, every doorway. The city felt different now, closer, smaller, dangerous. She knew she was being hunted. Each instinct in her body screamed the same warning. The cartel was near, and they were patient predators. She tried to blend in, passing groups of late-night pedestrians, ducking into the shadows whenever someone lingered too long in her peripheral vision. But nothing could hide the feeling that she was being followed. Every car that slowed as it passed her, every pair of headlights that lingered too long, made her stomach twist. Cami's mind raced, thinking through escape routes, safe houses she could reach, places that might still be empty. She remembered the last time she had tried to outrun danger. It had worked once. Barely. This time, she had no margin for error. Her phone buzzed again. She hesitated, heart hammering, but forced herself to look. Another message. This one a photo taken from a distance, her silhouette moving down the street. Unmistakable. Her pulse quickened. They were tracking her. Every step she took was being watched, analyzed, anticipated. And Tommy, he still hadn't responded. Every hope of help had been crushed under the weight of reality. He wasn't coming. She had to accept that. The realization hit her like a blow to the chest. Sharp and unrelenting. The person she had relied on the most was gone, leaving her alone in the storm. Cami ducked into a narrow alley, pressing her back against the cold brick wall. She could hear voices low, rough, speaking in a language she didn't recognize, but the tone carried an unmistakable threat. The sound of footsteps on wet concrete grew louder. She held her breath, trying not to move, trying not to exist. The alley smelled of damp trash and fear. Every instinct screamed to run, but there was nowhere to go. The shadows seemed to close in around her. She could see a pair of boots move past the entrance of the alley, slow and deliberate. They hadn't noticed her. Yet her mind raced, planning her next move. She needed to keep moving, stay ahead, stay alive. She thought of the rooftops, of fire escapes, of every shortcut she had memorized from living in this part of the city. The cartel wouldn't stop. They couldn't afford to. One mistake, one hesitation, and it would be over. Every sound, the drip of water from a gutter, the scuff of shoes against concrete, even the distant wail of a siren felt amplified, a warning of the danger closing in. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to think, forcing herself to stay calm. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Cami moved quickly, silently, every step calculated. She slipped down another alley, then turned into a maze of back streets. She knew like the lines of her own hand. Her bag bounced against her side, her heart against her ribs, both threatening to betray her presence. She could feel the eyes on her, the heat of pursuit even without seeing them. Somewhere behind, she could hear the low rumble of engines, black SUVs moving with precision, cutting off streets, anticipating her moves. It was as if the city itself had turned against her. Every corner a potential trap, every street a challenge to her survival. She paused briefly at the corner of a deserted street, pressing her face into the shadows. From this vantage, she could see the silhouettes of three men, broad-shouldered, moving with careful coordination. Their faces were obscured, but the way they scanned the area, the way their weapons rested in their hands, told her everything she needed to know. These weren't amateurs. These were professionals, trained to hunt, to intimidate, to kill. The realization made her chest tighten. She was outmatched, outnumbered, and yet she couldn't stop. Running was the only option. Cami glanced at her phone one last time. No messages from Tommy. No sign of anyone coming to help. Just a silent device that reminded her of her isolation. She shoved it back into her bag and sprinted down the street, weaving through shadows, jumping over puddles, disappearing into the night. The rain plastered her hair to her face, made every movement slippery, treacherous, but she kept going. Every turn, every corner, every darkened doorway was a gamble. She knew she might not make it out unscathed, but she had no choice. The cartel was coming, relentless and unforgiving. And she was alone. The night was far from over, and the hunt had only just begun. Cami ducked into an abandoned parking lot, her lungs burning, heart hammering like a drum. The rain had turned the concrete slick, each step threatening to betray her position. She pressed herself against the wall of a darkened building, listening. Somewhere in the distance, the faint growl of engines and the crunch of tires on gravel signaled that they were close. The cartel didn't make mistakes. They were professionals, patient and methodical, and she knew she had only seconds to plan her next move. Every instinct screamed at her, "Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't let them corner you." She crept along the shadows, using the parked cars for cover, trying to stay unseen. Her bag weighed heavily against her shoulder, but she dared not drop it. It held everything she might need: her identity, the small savings she had managed to hide, and a few items that could help her survive the night. The wind shifted, carrying a metallic scent that made her stomach knot. Something about it felt wrong, and instinctively she knew it wasn't just rain or the city. It was them. Someone had spotted her. She froze, pressed herself flat against the cold metal of a car. A flashlight beam cut across the lot, slicing through the darkness, illuminating puddles and tire treads. Her breath caught. The beam paused, then swung slowly back the other way. Whoever was holding it was methodical, searching, moving with deliberate purpose. Cami forced herself to stay still, heart threatening to burst. Every second stretched into eternity. She could almost feel the danger pressing against her skin. Invisible but suffocating. Then, footsteps, soft, deliberate, echoed across the lot. She counted 3, maybe 4. Her mind raced. There was no way she could outrun all of them. She had to be clever, had to find a way to vanish into the night. Cami's eyes landed on a chain link fence at the edge of the lot. Beyond it, the alley twisted into another section of the city she knew well. If she could just make it there, she might have a chance. She waited for the beam to move away, then darted forward, slipping between cars, keeping low. One misstep, one sound, and it would be over. The rain splattered her face, blurring her vision. But she pressed on, relying on memory, instincts, and sheer adrenaline. The echo of footsteps behind her told her that she hadn't shaken them yet. Suddenly, a shout rang out, cutting through the rain and darkness. Her heart froze. Someone had spotted her, and they were closing in fast. Cami dove behind a dumpster, pressing herself against the metal, listening as boots scuffed across wet concrete. The sound was close to close. She could hear the muffled murmur of voices, the soft click of a weapon being drawn. Her hands trembled as she searched for a way out, eyes scanning for any escape route. The fear that gripped her was sharper than anything she had felt before, but beneath it, determination burned. She would not go down without a fight. Her gaze fell on a narrow service door at the far end of the lot, partially open, leading into darkness. It was risky. There could be more danger inside, but staying outside was certain death. She sprinted toward it, careful to avoid puddles that could give her away. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. She reached the door, yanking it open and slipping inside, the cold metal frame pressing against her back. The room was dark, filled with crates and shadows, but it offered temporary cover. She sank to the floor, chest heaving, ears straining. The sounds of pursuit faded slightly outside, replaced by the dripping of water and her own rapid heartbeat. Cami allowed herself a brief moment to gather her thoughts. She knew she couldn't stay here long. The cartel would find her if she lingered. She had to keep moving, to stay ahead of them, to survive. Her mind ran through every option: rooftops, back alleys, the river path she had memorized, but each carried risk. She felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on her even harder. Now Tommy wasn't coming. He wouldn't save her. That realization, sharp and bitter, burned like fire in her chest. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. If she was going to survive, she would have to be smarter, faster, and braver than ever before. She rose slowly, testing her footing, listening for any sound that might betray her position. The room offered limited cover, but it also gave her time to plan her next move. The rain outside hammered against the metal roof, masking some of the noises, giving her a slim advantage. She peered through a gap in the crates, watching shadows shift outside. The cartel was methodical, but she was resourceful. Every second counted, Every decision could mean life or death, and for the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of control of fragile, dangerous sense that she might just outsmart them. But she knew the night was far from over, and the shadows waiting for her were patient and deadly. Cami moved cautiously through the abandoned warehouse, the shadows stretching long and sinister under the dim, flickering lights. Every step she took echoed against the metal walls, bouncing back like a warning. Her bag swung against her side, the weight pressing her down, but she forced herself to keep moving. She knew she couldn't hide forever. The cartel was closing in, relentless and precise. The faint rumble of engines outside reminded her that they were always one step behind or perhaps one step ahead. Her pulse pounded as adrenaline sharpened her senses. She could hear every drip of water from the leaking roof, every distant scuff of a boot on the concrete floor, and it all felt like a countdown. The warehouse was a maze of crates and pallets, shadows twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. She pressed herself against a stack of boxes, peering around the corner outside to figures moved with measured steps, their black jackets blending seamlessly with the darkness. They paused, scanning the area. Cami's heart skipped a beat. If they saw her now, there would be no running, no negotiating. She needed a plan fast. She crawled low, her palms scraping against the rough concrete, and moved toward a side exit she had spotted from the alleyway earlier. Every movement had to be precise. One wrong sound could blow her cover. As she edged toward the door, a sharp clang reverberated from the other side of the warehouse. She froze, every nerve on high alert. The footsteps behind her grew louder. Someone was inside. She pressed herself against a crate, holding her breath, listening. The figure passed, unaware of her hiding spot, and she let out a quiet exhale. She hadn't realized she'd been holding. The room smelled of dust and old metal, mixed with a faint tang of something she couldn't place. Her thoughts raced, and she reminded herself that Tommy wasn't coming. He wouldn't answer. He wouldn't save her. And the fear that clawed at her chest was hers to face alone. Cami moved again, slower this time, calculating each step. Her eyes scanned the floor, looking for anything she could use. A loose plank, a broken pipe, anything that might give her leverage. She spotted a narrow vent along the back wall. It was a tight fit, but if she could crawl through it, she might escape unnoticed. The decision was immediate. She had no choice. She tested the opening. It was small, but just enough. She backed into it, pushing herself forward, feeling the cold metal scrape against her arms. Her breath came in shallow bursts, her heart threatening to give her away with every thump. She had to keep calm. She had to keep quiet. The cartel was precise, methodical, and deadly. One mistake now could end her life. She crawled through the vent, inch by inch, muscles burning and back aching. Outside, the rain drummed against the roof, masking some of her movements. She emerged into a narrow alley behind the warehouse, drenched and trembling, but unseen. The city around her was a blur of wet concrete and dim lights. She paused, scanning for signs of the cartel. The black SUVs were gone for now, but she knew it was only temporary. They wouldn't give up, not tonight. She had to keep moving, keep thinking, stay ahead of them. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every turn could be a trap. Cami sprinted down the alley, slipping through puddles and ducking behind corners. Her breath was ragged, her muscles screaming, but she didn't stop. She had survived this far through fear, instinct, and sheer will. Now, determination drove her forward. She glanced at her phone. Still no messages from Tommy. Still nothing. The absence of his help was a bitter reminder that she was alone, and she had to rely entirely on herself. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of courage flickered. If she could outsmart them, if she could stay 2 steps ahead, she might survive the night. But the cartel was relentless, patient, and deadly. And Cami knew one thing for certain. The night was far from over, and the shadows waiting for her were hungry for more than just fear. Cami's legs burned with every step as she ran through the maze of back streets, the city around her a blur of wet pavement and flickering streetlights. The sound of pursuit was relentless footsteps echoing, the distant roar of engines, the faint clatter of metal hitting the ground. She ducked behind a dumpster. Pressing herself flat against a cold metal, her chest heaving, the shadows seemed to move with her, stretching, bending, alive with threat. Every nerve in her body screamed that they were closing in, and she knew the cartel would not make mistakes. They didn't need to see her face to find her. They could smell fear, read tension, and track movement like bloodhounds on a scent. Her hand brushed against a discarded pipe lying in the wet alley, and she clutched it tightly. It wouldn't do much against trained men, but it was better than nothing. She could hear voices now, closer, rough and deliberate, speaking in short, sharp commands. The black SUVs had cut her off from the main roads. Whoever was out here had calculated her every move. She realized then that she was trapped in this small corridor, a funnel the cartel had designed to corner her. Panic tried to rise, but she forced herself to breathe, to think, to calculate. Every second could mean life or death. As shadow moved across the wall, a man, tall and broad, weapon in hand, scanning the alley. Cami pressed herself further into the darkness, the pipe shaking slightly in her grip. Her mind raced, running through every possible escape. The end of the alley led to a locked gate, but there was a narrow gap at the side. If she could just reach it, she could slip away. The shadow shifted closer, and she froze, counting his slow, deliberate steps. 1, 2, 3. Then, as he passed, she bolted, sprinting toward the gap, slipping over wet concrete, her body barely clearing the edge as she squeezed through. She tumbled onto the other side, coughing and shivering, but unseen. For a moment, the rain was deafening, masking her frantic movements. She pressed herself against a wall, scanning the street ahead.